Hari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Praja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Praja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Praja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 60, and the text is 41. Yadvanchaya nirpasikhamanayon gagyanyam Jayanta nahusha gavadaya aikya patyam Rajam vishirja divishorvanam ambujaksham Siddhanti te nupadavim ta ihasmita kim Yadyanshaya nirpasikab manayon gayanyam Jayantana usaya gaya daya aikya patyam Rajam vishirja divishorvanam ampujaksham Siddhanti te nupadavim tahastita kim Yadvanchaya nirpasikhamanayon gavyanyam Jayanta nahusa gayadaya aikya patyam Rajam vishirja divishorvanam ampujaksham Siddhanti te nupadavim te hastita kim Please chant. Yadvanchaya nirpasikhamanayon gavanyam Jayanta nahusan padaya aikya patyam Rajam vishniya divishorvaham ambujaksham Siddhanti te nupadavim te histita kim Yadvancha nirpasikhamanayo nipavanyam Jayanta nahusa gadaya aikya patyam Rajam vishirja divishorvanam ambujaksham Siddhanti te nupadavim nahi hastita kim Yadvanchaya nirpasikhamanayo nigavanyam Jayanta Nahusa Kadai Gaya Akya Pacham Rajam Vishirja Divishoryanam Ambujaksha Siddhanti Te Nupadavinte Astita Kim. Yadvanshaya Nirpasika Manayon Geyanya Jayanta Mausa Gaya Daya Sikya Pacham Rajam Vishirja Divishorvanam Ambujaksha Siddhanti Te Nupadavinte Astita Kim. Yadvanshaya Nirpasika Manayo Nigayanya Jayanta Mahusa Kadaya Sikya Pajam Rajam Vishirja Divishorvanam Ambujaksha Dantite Nupadavinta Yastita Kim. Thank you very much. The word for word, yat. For whom? Vanchaya, out of desire. Nirpa, of kings. Sikhamanaya, the crown jewels. Angavanya Jayanta Mahusa Gaya Adaya. Sorry, you have to read the whole line. Anga, the father of Vena. Vanya, Partha, the son of Vena. My computer changed it, sorry. Prithu, the son of Vena. Jayanta, Bharata. Nahusa, Jayati, Gaya, and others. Aikya, exclusive. Patyam, having sovereignty. Rajam, their kingdoms. Vishirja, abandoning. Vivisha, entered. Vanam, the forest. Ambuja, Aksha, O lotus-eyed one. Siddhanti, suffer frustration. Ate, your. Anupadavim, on the path. Te, they. Iha, in this world. Astitaha, fixed. Kim, weather. So, the translation for text 41 is as follows, and this is Queen Rukmini speaking to Krishna. Wanting your association, the best of kings, Anga, Vanya, Jayanta, Nahusa, Gaya, and others, abandoned their absolute sovereignty and entered the forest to seek you out. How could those kings suffer frustration in this world, O lotus-eyed one? In the purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Here Queen Rukmini refutes the idea put forth by Lord Krishna in text 13. In fact, Srimati Rukmini Devi repeats Lord Krishna's own words. The Lord said, Astitaha padavim sabru Praya Siddhanti Yasitaha. Women who follow my path generally suffer, is the translation. Here Rukmini Devi says, Siddhanti te nupadavim ta ihasitaha kim. Why should those fixed on your path suffer in this world? She gives the example of many great kings who renounced their powerful sovereignty to enter the forest, where they performed austerities and worshipped the Lord, intensely desiring his transcendental association. Thus, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, Srimati Rukmini Devi here intends to tell Sri Krishna, quote, you have said that I, a king's daughter, am unintelligent and frustrated because I married you. But how can you accuse all these great enlightened kings of being unintelligent? They were the wisest of men, yet they gave up everything to follow you and were certainly not frustrated by the result. Indeed, they achieved the perfection of your association, close quote. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurin Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shuta Padakamlam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padasa Gana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavanishvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Ramapada Swami Iti Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Just move this around. So here, Queen Rukmini is referencing Krishna's statement from text 12. Text 13. And that particular statement was the following one. I'm going to read the Sanskrit and then the translation because she's responding to this particular statement. And this part where Rukmini is responding to Lord Krishna, she's actually taking each statement of Lord Krishna and giving a particular response to each statement. So this particular statement today is in response to this statement made by Lord Krishna. So I'm going to read that statement. Apasta yatmanam pumsam alokapatam iyusam astitaha padavim subru prayasidanti yositaha. So we heard that in the purport where it was 2 lines were recited. I'm just reading the whole verse. So the translation for that statement of Lord Krishna's in text 13 earlier on in this chapter was, O fine-browed lady, women are usually destined to suffer when they stay with men whose behavior is uncertain and who pursue a path not approved by society. So it's very interesting because the commentary related to this verse by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that Rukmini actually, behind what she's saying, there's a certain intention. So often one may say something And it requires a little bit of thoughtfulness on the part of the hearer to understand the person's intention. Sometimes it's apparent and sometimes not. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he spells out the underlying intention of Rukmini. So these were the words she actually spoke, and then I'm going to read Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur spelling out her intention. Wanting your association, the best of kings, Anga, Vanya, Jayanta, Nakusha, Gaya, and others abandoned their absolute sovereignty and entered the forest to seek you out. How could those kings suffer frustration in this world, O Lodaside One? So that's a straightforward statement. And here is the intention behind the statement. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So quoting, it's as though Rukmini is actually stating her intention by these words. You said that women who follow my path generally suffer. And that was Jaistita Padavim Subru Praya Siddhanti Yoshitaha. And her intention is spelled out by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. That is also a foolish statement. So we're going to have to look at how it is that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually identifies this particular statement hidden but spelled out by him, that she's actually telling Krishna, this is a foolish statement you're making. And just by the fact that Krishna said, women who follow my path generally suffer. So why is that a foolish statement, or how is it that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is deducing this or attributing this particular intention to Queen Rukmini? So Rukmini puts together this statement of Krishna together with the previous statement made by Krishna, because she said this is also, or Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, has Rukmini stating her intention, this is also a foolish statement. So it's combined with the previous statement made by Krishna. And the previous statement made by Krishna was, terrified of these kings, O lovely browed one, we took shelter in the ocean. We have become enemies of powerful men, and we practically abandoned the royal throne. So that was text 12, earlier in the chapter. This is a picture Krishna's painting of himself. And it was discussed yesterday in the class. So in this latter case, in this text 12, the reason Rukmini considered that statement a foolish statement, this one where Krishna says, we took shelter in the ocean, we've become enemies of powerful men, and we practically abandoned our royal throne. So the reason Rukmini considered this a foolish statement, and it's something that provoked her anger, as it was brought up yesterday, is that she heard Krishna glorifying other men who might have become her husband. And the truth of the matter was that Lord Krishna had in fact opposed all the contemporary kings during this particular incarnation. And he had befriended only a few kings, and in fact, particularly the Pandavas and royal members of his dynasty. So these same kings that Krishna appeared to be glorifying by saying to Rukmini that, he even abandoned his throne, he took shelter in the ocean, it's as though he was afraid of them. They are described where their mentality is highlighted. And so we see something of how they were thinking. It's described much earlier on in the 53rd chapter. So these kings, they had actually come together and they'd reached a decision amongst themselves, and it indicates their animosity towards Lord Krishna. So this is what the kings communicated amongst each other. If Krishna comes here with Balaram and the other Yadus to steal the bride, meaning Rukmini at that time, we shall band together and fight him. So it's quite clear they had animosity towards Lord Krishna. So we're going to look at, how is it that Lord Krishna is saying to Rukmini that, basically was afraid of them and he ran away to the ocean. So based on this decision on the part of these kings that had animosity towards Lord Krishna, they, in fact, had gone to this wedding that had been prearranged. It was to be the wedding of Rukmini and King Shishupal, an arrangement that had been made by Rukmini's brother, Rukmi. And they had gone with their entire armies to the wedding. Now, can you imagine, generally to a wedding, one goes in one's best clothing, whatever one's occupation is, one is still in like formal dress and perfectly attired. These kings, they did not present themselves that way. They, instead of arriving with their wives and that was it to a wedding, they arrived with the entire army. So it was not obvious, the animosity towards Lord Krishna. And they had a full complement, it said, of their military conveyances. So it wasn't the army on foot, maybe, the whole army dressed ready for a wedding, not at all. So the army was, with their full military conveyances, meaning their horses, their elephants, their chariots. So the contemporary action, or the complementary action, I should say, on the part of Lord Krishna at the scene of the marriage, to as Rukmini was leaving Ambika temple, is described in this way. So remember, we just heard Krishna say something about himself to Rukmini, that basically fled, took shelter in the ocean. He's created enemies as though he's afraid of the kings. So here's actually what took place. And this is described earlier in the Srimad Bhagavatam. While his enemies, meaning these kings with their entire armies and military conveyances, looked on, the Lord seized the princess, meaning Rukmini, who was eager to mount his chariot. Lifting the princess onto his chariot, whose flag bore the emblem of Garuda, Lord Madhava drove back the circle of kings. With Balaram in the lead, he slowly exited, like a lion removing his prey from the midst of jackals. That's the actual description, the actual way it took place. Clearly, these kings are described almost in a kind of, they've been compared to scavengers. So having no right at all to be there and to be functioning in that way. And Krishna just, very precisely and perfectly removing Queen Rukmini from that scene. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur continues with what Rukmini's intention is in her communication with Lord Krishna. So she's responding to the statement he made earlier, because Krishna did a whole stream of statements and she's isolating each particular one and responding to it. So to this one, of today, Rukmini says, as per Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, if she were to have stated her intention clearly, generally one doesn't say, I'm going to do this because I want you to know. Generally, not necessarily. One just makes a statement, I'm going to do this. And it requires the other person to process and understand, the person's saying this because they need something to be executed, or the person's saying this because they would like something to go in a particular way. Here's Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur clarifying Rukmini's intention. You have also said that I, a king's daughter, am unintelligent and frustrated because I married you. But how can you accuse all the great enlightened kings like Jayanta Bharata of being unintelligent? They were the wisest of men and gave up everything to follow you and were certainly not frustrated by the result. So she's getting the implication in Krishna's statement, just by him saying that he had, implying that he had created enemies, he had fled the scene, and she's actually saying to him, he's implying that actually, and this is connected to yesterday's verse, which I should read just to clarify. This was what the statement she had made in the previous verse. My Lord, as a lion drives away lesser animals to claim his proper share, you drove off the assembled kings with the resounding twang of your charanga bow, and then claimed me, which we've just heard, your fair share. That is the sheer foolishness, my dear Gada Garaja, for you to say you took shelter in the ocean out of fear of these kings. So what she's intending to say is Krishna's telling her that as a king's daughter, she's unintelligent and frustrated because she married him. But she's saying, but how can you accuse all the great enlightened kings like King Bharata of being unintelligent? So she's drawing out the statement. They were the wisest of men and gave up everything to follow you. She did the same thing. She followed Krishna. And she certainly doesn't see herself as being frustrated by the results. And so she's just bringing in, possibly it's by virtue of her being of the female sex that this accusation can be made against her. So then she brings in male counterparts, the kings, who were pious kings, that they were actually, many of them gave up their royal positions in order to actually practice renunciation in the forest, and hence follow Lord Krishna. So there is indeed a description of King Bharata, which corroborates Rukmini's understanding. So here's something of what King Bharata did, because she references him. Of the 100 sons of Lord Rishabdev, the eldest, Bharata, was completely devoted to Lord Narayan. It is because of Bharata's fame that this planet is now celebrated as the great Bharatvarsha. So that's coming in the Srimad Bhagavatam. We get some information on King Bharata. He was carrying a great deal of devotion for Lord Narayan during his reign. And we heard the same thing about Rukmini, that she had heard about Krishna and she had developed this great devotion for him long before that moment where Krishna had actually removed her from that scene of all the demoniac kings, and her wedding that was to take place to one of that category of kings. So there's further evidence also provided of the result obtained by King Bharata, his following Lord Narayan. And this is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, because Rukmini is saying to Lord Krishna, the result of these kings was a positive result. So here we hear what actually was the result for King Bharata because of his devotion to Lord Narayan. King Bharata rejected this material world, considering all types of material pleasure temporary and useless. Leaving his beautiful young wife and family, he worshipped Lord Hari by severe austerities and attained the abode of the Lord after 3 lifetimes. So that's given in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 11th canto in the 2nd chapter. So this is, of course, a description of one of the lives of King Bharata. There's also his life as a deer, and there's also his life as an exalted Paramahamsa, devotee of the Lord. But since Rukmini had referenced him as King Bharata, I've just extracted that to highlight what was the nature of his life as a king. So this argument of Queen Rukmini that wise men give up everything and follow Lord Krishna, because that's her argument, because she's taking that category of kings and saying that they're how can he call them unintelligent? So it means that they're wise men because they've given up everything to follow Lord Krishna. And this is in fact a course of action stressed upon by Sukadev Goswami in the Bhagavatam when he's speaking to Maharaj Parikshit. Because this is what Sukadev Goswami says. So it's very much echoing Queen Rukmini's view of these kings. And of course, she's contending Krishna's argument that, he was fearful of these kings, and actually it's implying that she was foolish to have married him. So here's Srila Sukadev Goswami speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, where he's also stressing this course of action of devoting one's life to Lord Krishna. So this is what Sukadev Goswami says to Maharaj Parikshit. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he's full of all material desires, without any material desires, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the supreme whole, the personality of Godhead. So it's a course of action that is being urged for everyone. Whatever one's internal status is in terms of one's attachment to material enjoyment or not, or even being in material life as suffering and wanting escape from it, still one should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he's the supreme whole. So this stress is actually being put upon practicing Bhakti Yoga because that's the yoga of devotion to the Supreme Lord. So worshipping the Supreme Lord is considered to be the means for becoming perfect, the supreme means for self-realization. So that self-realization is breaking the bondage to material life. So the basic tenet given by Srila Prabhupada is that a living being naturally, being a part and parcel of the supreme whole, because that was the statement of Srila Sukadev Goswami, he's the supreme whole. So Srila Prabhupada explains that every living being is part and parcel, that minute part and parcel of the supreme whole. So the term that's used is Purusham Purnam, meaning the supreme whole. And it's in the same way that the limbs of one's body are naturally meant to serve the whole body. So you can't separate it out. You can't separate out your limb that is a dislocated arm separate from the body doing its own thing. It doesn't make sense. It has to serve the body. It has to, what the intelligence is requiring for the hand to reach out and turn a page. The arm, the hand will serve that purpose. So it has that close connection with the whole body. So in the same way, the individual spirit soul is part of that supreme soul. So it can't function separately. It has to function in coordination with the supreme whole, the supreme soul. So it means that one is naturally meant to serve the supreme soul. And in fact, one should feel happy because one comes to experience the happiness of the Supreme Lord. Because there's that natural, organic functioning. So the Supreme Lord is very happy as the limbs of his body, so to speak, are also working nicely coordinated with him. So oneself feels a happiness too. So Srila Prabhupada explains this as a kind of intuition, that even if one is a being that has all kinds of conditioning, meaning there's like all these learned patterns in the mind of, how one thinks one will get one's happiness. And it's been programmed, right from childhood and previous lives. Of course, one's also carrying those subtle patterns. even if one is carrying all those patterns of how one is going to get one's happiness, because that's what's dictating how one's going to act and how one's going to attempt to function, still, one will see that there's a certain intuitive desire to be giving, to not actually be attending to what one's mind is dictating will make one's happy. So hence you find persons often being very philanthropic or, practicing some sort of charitable social structure. I recall, because I've grew up in a country that was closely connected to the British monarchy, I'm sort of very aware of the British monarchy, and now my brother lives in England. And there was a time when one of the young princes had married an American woman who had no supposedly royal pedigree. And so there was a lot of criticism. And it's very interesting when one looks at actually the history of this woman. She was heavily involved in philanthropic work. So the requisite mindset was there to, become part of that royal household. And the intelligence that Rukmini is speaking of is this kind of aspiration to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Because that's what's been displayed by this description I read of King Bharata. So that aspiration to satisfy the Lord, even at the cost of one's own satisfaction on a sensual level, means you may put aside something of what your mind is wanting that's going to give you happiness, because you actually turn your focus to trying to satisfy the Supreme Lord, so making time and space to perform actions with the consciousness that it's for the Supreme Lord. This actually then becomes one's prime duty. So that's the intelligence, that one actually starts to see it as one's prime duty to function in that way, even at the cost of one's own satisfaction on a sensual level. So there's the contrast of what is a less intelligent position, or one could even say unintelligent position. And this would be of wanting some sort of material enjoyment, meaning there's that selfish outlook. It's just for myself. So again, dislocated from the supreme whole, forgetting one's identity as a soul in relation to the supreme soul. One may worship demigods. So I know a particular person who does just that. And Lord Krishna puts it this way, and this is from Bhagavad Gita 7:20. He says, those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So notice, intelligence has been stolen according to Krishna if one is actually taking that path where you actually even look for help to allow you to satisfy your desires for some sort of sensual enjoyment, believing that's the source of happiness. You look for the demigods to facilitate that kind of enjoyment. So that particular verse was Kamais Tais Krita Gyana Prapajante Nya Devataha Tam Tam Kiyamanam Ashtaya Prakriya Niyata, and I think my computer changed this. Maya, sounds wrong. Thus, the less intelligent view is one where spiritual sense has been lost. So that's what the less intelligent view. And we're looking at all of this because Rukmini is saying that Krishna was implying that she's unintelligent. So we're looking at what unintelligence is viewed from the point of view even of Krishna. um, so it means that one's spiritual sense has been lost because there's taking shelter of demigods for immediate fulfillment of material desires. So the intelligent view, by contrast, is knowing that Lord Krishna is the master of all. And this is stated by, there's a recount of Krishna's pastimes with Lord Balaram in the Adi Leela, chapter 5. And this statement was a statement made by Lord Balaram in that account in the Adi Leela, where he says, Lord Krishna is the supreme controller and all others are his servants. They dance as he makes them do. So that's Lord Balaram's view, that that would imply that the demigods are like puppets because Krishna is the master of them. So they have to move according to his desires and his will. So that comes from Adi Leela, chapter 5, that particular statement of Lord Balaram about Lord Krishna being that supreme controller. So the conclusion in that particular account where there's this recount of Krishna and Balaram and their pastimes, and there's this statement made by Lord Balaram. The implication in that pastime is that Lord Chaitanya is also the only controller, because that was from Chaitanya Charitamrita. All others are his associates or servants. So Rukmini's intention is as follows. You have said that I, a king's daughter, am unintelligent and frustrated because I married you. So I've been trying to expand the picture a little bit of, what is considered unintelligent. But how, and this is Rukmini, but how can you accuse all these great enlightened kings of being unintelligent? She expands the picture. The category is broad. Then you've got to call all these other kings unintelligent. And so Rukmini's intentions, they end in this final statement as per Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So this is quoting, it is Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur drawing out Rukmini's intention. Indeed, they, the great enlightened kings, achieve the perfection of your association. That is what she concludes if one were to draw out her intention. And what she's actually saying when she talks about these kings achieving this perfection in the association of Lord Krishna, there's a nice way that the same idea is expressed by Srila Sanatana Goswami, where in the commentary on this verse, he says, O lotus-eyed Lord, they wait to see your beauty. So the perfection of the association with Krishna, these kings are actually waiting to see Krishna's beauty. So this answers that question. Will they who are situated on this path suffer even in the forest? Because that's one of the underlying things that Rukmini is looking at. These kings, when they go to the forest, does it mean that they're going to suffer because they've chosen to follow your path and look to you? And there's a description of Maharaj Bharata, which paints the picture of at least one of these kings and what happens in the forest. So here's the description. So we can see if it corroborates Rukmini's argument with Lord Krishna. Maharaj Bharata, in the garden of Pujaha Ashram, lived alone and collected a variety of flowers, twigs, and tulsi leaves. He also collected the water of the Gandaki river, as well as various roots, fruits, and bulbs. With these, he offered food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva, and worshipping him, he remained satisfied. In this way, his heart was completely uncontaminated, and he did not have the least desire for material enjoyment. All material desires vanished. In this steady position, he felt full satisfaction and was situated in devotional service. So there's a description of one of the kings that Rukmini is referencing. and what his experience was, having gone to the forest and having given up his sovereignty. So it's would corroborate her statement that actually the result is not a terrible result, as Krishna is trying to paint out that there's frustration or unhappiness. Because we're hearing he actually lost his desires for material enjoyment. So whatever the mind, those patterns in the mind, they just fall away. It says they vanished. And he felt full satisfaction. So even that very simple behavior that he was doing of just collecting whatever was available to him in nature and offering it to the Supreme Lord, he actually was experiencing satisfaction. So this is Rukmini proving her point that these great kings, they were super intelligent and they actually achieved great satisfaction. So coming full circle, as one engages in devotional service to the Lord, the mind becomes purified of all material desires. And one becomes fully satisfied. That's actually how the sequence goes. So this leads to the generalization that for all humanity, this is the result of self-realization. And it's very nicely spelt out. Here's a verse coming from the first canto, the second chapter, Shukadev Goswami. The supreme occupation dharma for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service to the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted in order to completely satisfy the self. By rendering devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. So it would certainly be correct, Rukmini's analysis and her intention of communicating to Krishna that these kings that surrendered their sovereignty and actually took to this life of renunciation, their result was one of detachment from material desires and attaining this great satisfaction. And indeed, this knowledge also that comes from performing devotional service, that was also there. So these are some thoughts on this verse today. If there's anything to contribute to the discussion.
Thank you, Krishnarcana. It's very nice, and appreciate the preparation to just confirm. One, in the presentation that you made is just thinking about the overall pastimes of this chapter. In one sense, is similar to the technique of presenting the philosophy that Srila Jiva Goswami uses, this Purva Paksha type of presentation, that you make a statement that is taking the position of the person who is dismissing or disregarding, or the skeptical type of statement, and then you go on and refute it. So Krishna is taking the position of making the disregarding statement about himself, and then Rukmini Devi is refuting the whole thing completely flatly by incredible philosophy, and so wonderfully put, and so point by point refuting all those statements. So it's quite amazing. One thing that in what you mentioned, what you highlighted in the class, is this idea of calling these devotees or these kings unintelligent, and in fact they're the wisest, so they should be glorified, those who are following Krishna's path. And I'm what you're thinking in a much more lower level, not in the level of Shrimati Rukmini Devi or these great kings, but sometimes you see when people in general that don't have proper understanding, they criticize devotees when they take the life of devotional service. They fully dedicate their life in devotional service. So sometimes devotees that take up living in the temples and doing full-time service, this is what they do, or instead, you become a brahmachari or you become a brahmacharini and like that. Sometimes people see that as escapists, people that cannot be successful in the world, and you take this sort of lesser type of activities that are not contributing very substantially to the world. And in fact, that's very unintelligent, because the fact is that the people who are making these decisions, the devotees who are joining and serving Krishna in full, they're the wisest. And Srila Prabhupada makes those statements. There's the best of men, the best of mankind. And in one sense, as devotees, sometimes we have to catch that reality, because the fact is that, as aspiring in this position, sometimes we may experience some frustration, but the fact is that we become purified. So it's altogether, a very wonderful statement.
Thank you so very much for your contribution and bringing it also to the reality of how one can view the persons who have taken to a renounced lifestyle. It's quite glorious, and those persons need to be viewed indeed as the wisest in society. So, it's the hidden glory of persons taking to renounced life and actually utilizing all intelligence to combat those learned patterns in the mind that push for material enjoyment. So that private battle is the glorious part, and it's so private and so hidden. I mean, it's not so externally visible. So for somebody to be looking from a great distance and actually not understanding the glory of overcoming on an internal level those the pushings of those material desires, and deliberately choosing to not go in that direction, but to actually devote all intelligence, energy, strength to performing work for the Supreme Lord as their duty in life, is truly the most glorious position, and can't be easily understood. Can't be easily understood. It requires certainly a good understanding of Krishna conscious philosophy and scriptural understanding to be able to look with the proper understanding and assessment of the persons living that lifestyle. So thank you very much for bringing that up. It's a very, what's the word? Little attended to category that requires glorification. So thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful talk. While you were just answering Prabhu's, or adding to it, it made me think of everybody's internal battle of Kurukshetra, like your internal battle that you're having. And it was kind of actually humorous to hear Rukmini Devi, even in this position, she's married to Sri Krishna, also doing what we kind of do as wives, to be like, why did you say, what did you mean by this, and it's on such a spiritual level, though, too, and it's very intelligent. That's the intelligence. So it's really nice to see that as well, and getting a perspective of people's internal battle as to why they may look at us and be like, you're escaping, or you're not trying to be part of this reality where this is a duality, and this is, we're trying to get out of this samsara. So I thank you. I think it was really nice.
Well, thank you for your comment. Just reinforcing the appreciation also of Queen Rukmini, because it's such incredible intelligence, when you hear how she's refuting Lord Krishna's arguments. This particular one, it's quite a simple technique from the point of view that being told that she is unintelligent, or implied that she's unintelligent to have chosen Lord Krishna as her husband, then actually using the technique of generalizing to others who've also chosen to devote their life to Lord Krishna. And she particularly uses the category of the great kings, because that's a category she knows about. She's a king's daughter. So she takes it away from the personal to the general and points to them to, can you also call them unintelligent? So it's a clever understanding and clever way to argue against Krishna's laying the ground, as Subal said, for being refuted, his statement being refuted, but she does it so excellently. So thank you also for adding that appreciation of Queen Rukmini. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.